This experiment is titled Behavioral Study of Obedience, conducted by Stanley Milgram, a psychologist from Yale University in 1963. Good afternoon, class. My name is Sebastian Taylor, and I will be reviewing slide 1, or section A, the purpose of the research and what the researcher is trying to test or prove. In this experiment, psychologist Stanley Milgram is exploring the darker side of human curiosity by testing the conflict between obedience to authority and personal conscience. This is important because it is also related to the concept of how easily ordinary people could be influenced into committing atrocities. For example, Germans in World War II. Next, Lance Johnson will discuss the research method used by Stanley Milgram. Research method. Who are the subjects? The study saw 40 males between the ages of 20 and 50 that were from nearly youth and the surrounding community. Subjects varied quietly in both profession and education. Subjects were seen by advertising in a newspaper and direct mail notification. Subjects were under the impression that they would be participating in a study about memory and learning at Yale University. Subjects were paid $4.50 for their class. Research method. Procedure. One subject and one accomplice would be included in each experiment. Each subject was thinking that they could be a teacher and a student, and include a teacher and a learner. The accomplice would be the learner will be strapped to an electric chair apparatus. What's more than be shockingly painful, or would cause them lasting damage. Research method. Procedure continues. The instrument may consist of 30 switches connected on an horizontal line. Each switch was labeled from 15 to 450 volts, with a 15 volt increment between each. Switches were grouped into sets of 4, described as light shock, moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock, extreme intensity shock, major severe shock, and the final 2 switches that are labeled as XXX. Subjects were shocked with a sample shock so they could be convinced that the shock is real. Subjects were told to accept the shock with every wrong answer given by the accomplice. They were in that situation.
After the completion of the experiment, the subjects were asked to participate in a post-experimental interview where they were asked, how painful to the learner were the last few shocks that you administered to him? Most of the subjects rated their level of administered shock at the highest possible level on a 14-point scale. The moderate response was 14, which was labeled extremely painful, and the mean response was 13.42. Researchers anticipated that those who were administering the shock would not pass the level assigned as very strong shock. As you can see using the table to the right, the very strong shock category has shocks with 195 volts up to 240 volts. In reality, all participants that administered the shock reached at least a level 20 or 300 volts. And at this level of 300 volts, the victims being shocked were no longer able to answer the questions because they were in so much pain. Some of the participants that were administering the shock were labeled as highly agitated, angry, and verbally protesting throughout the entire experiment. After each of the administrators delivered their individual maximum shock levels to the victims, their immediate behavior was very similar. Most of the administrators demanded a halt to the experiment, had heavy sighs of relief once the experiment was over. They wiped their brows and their forehead. They rubbed their fingers over their eyes, nervously reached for a cigarette, shook their heads in regret, and showed major signs of tension.
Now we discuss the next slide. Take a look at the methodology. You'll notice that the sample size representative. Look at the sample size. Table 1 consists of 40 male subjects between ages 20 and 50, although the distribution of occupation is broad. Women are excluded in the study. We believe the women begin the experiment. We also need to take into consideration that the subjects were selected from New Haven and the surrounding areas. A broader demographic would aid in strengthening the sample. Additionally, subjects were paid $4.50 for their participation, which likely helped exclude passive subjects. A mixed method of both qualitative and quantitative was utilized. Notes were kept to report on any unusual behavior occurring during the course of the experiments. Observers were directed to write objective descriptions of subjects' behavior. Also, post-experimental interviews were conducted, consisting of open-ended questions, projective measures, and attitude scales. The test results were quantified. For example, the dependent measure was identified as the maximum shock administered by the subject, whereas the defiant subject was defined at the point where the subject breaks off the experiment prior to reaching shock level 13, and the obedient subject administers all shock levels commanded. The subject is placed in a position of conflict, and the conflict must be resolved. The experiment gives the subject little time for reflection as the conflict comes on rapidly. Again, the subject is placed in a position in which he must respond to the competing demands of two individuals. We must note that the satisfaction of the victim and experimenter are mutually exclusive. The operationalization solidified the legitimacy of the experiment. It has face validity. The subject believed that they were participating in the study of memory and learning at Yale University. For example, the details of the instruments were carefully handled to ensure an appearance of authenticity. Each naive subject is given a sample shock from the generator prior to beginning his role as a teacher. The victim and subject have entered the experiment voluntarily, therefore have a sense of obligation. Let's move on to the conclusion. Observers underestimated the amount of obedience the subjects would display, which demonstrates the sheer strength of obedient tendencies. 26 subjects obeyed and 14 defied the experimenter. It is clear from the remarks and outward behavior of many participants that in punishing the victim, they are often acting against their own values. An extraordinary tension was generated by the procedures. In a large number of cases, the degree of tension reached extremes that are largely seen in socio-psychological laboratory studies. Subjects were observed to sweat, tremble, shudder, bite their lips, groan, dig their fingernails into their flesh. The results obtained from the experiment deviate radically from the prediction. We must note that in a pre-test of 14 Yale seniors, where they were asked to predict the behavior of 100 hypothetical subjects, the most general feeling was that few, if any, subjects would go beyond the designation of very strong shock, which is 195 to 240 volts. The estimates range from 0 to 3%. For example, the most pessimistic member of the class predicted that of 100 persons, 3 would continue to the most potent shock available on the shock generator, which is 450 volts. Upon command of the experimenter, each of the 40 subjects went beyond the expected breakoff point of 300 volts. No subject stopped prior to administering shock level 20. At this level, which is 300 volts, the victim kicks on the wall and no longer provides answers to the teacher's multiple choice questions.
This experiment yielded 2 major findings that were very shocking to researchers. It is important to note that many people from childhood understand that it is morally wrong to hurt another person against their will. That being said, the first major finding was that although many of the subjects showed deep disapproval and regret from the experiment, the majority of them complied with all of the commands. In fact, 26 of the 40 participants reached the maximum possible level of shock at 450 volts. The second finding was the major amounts of unanticipated tension on the subjects caused by this procedure. It was anticipated that the conscience would completely take over and prevent many of the subjects from participating in this experiment. Instead, many of the subjects were overtaken from their conscience and very conflicted with tension and emotional strain from the experiment. An important takeaway from this study is that understanding the phenomenon of obedience relies heavily on particular case-by-case analysis. In this study, the levels of obedience, or lack thereof, from the individual subjects studied and analyzed as a standalone explanation of obedience.
So is this experiment convincing? I would argue yes. Why? Because the procedures provided authenticity to the experiment. Although the experiment was unethical, the results of the experiment provide enough evidence to support the conclusion reached. Secondly, conflict. At a more general level, the conflict stems from the opposition of two deeply ingrained behavior dispositions. First, the disposition not to harm other people, and second, the tendency to obey those whom we perceive to be legitimate authorities. Therefore, it is safe to state that the individual who is commanded by a legitimate authority ordinarily obeys. Lastly, let's look at ethics and replication. Due to the unethical nature of this experiment, we would not recommend replication. There are various ethical methods that can be explored to study obedience. This method should not be replicated. To conclude, I posed a question: would similar results yield if we had a larger pool, or if women were included in the experiment? My gut feeling is that the results wouldn't deviate too far from the results obtained in this experiment.
On behalf of all of the members of Group 4, we would like to thank you for taking the time to view our presentation. We hope you found it interesting and that you learned something new.